My start began here at IU. Those of you who've heard me speak before have heard the story of how IU kind of put me on the map. In the early 70s, when I came to school here, the College of Arts and Sciences had an experimental curriculum department. If you could convince a panel of deans and professors that you had an idea for a course that had never been taught before, you had a chance to go before them and pitch it if you had the backing of a department on campus. So I designed what I hoped would be the first world's college course about comic books. Comic books is a legitimate American art form, as indigenous to this country as jazz. And comic books is modern-day folklore. The ancient gods of Greece, Rome, and Egypt still exist, only today they wear spandex and capes. And as I walked in, the dean looked at me over this long table and said, "So you're the kid who wants to teach a course on funny books at my university?" And I knew I was in deep trouble. He let me speak for 3 minutes, then cut me off. He said, "Mr. Uslan, stop. Come on. I don't buy any of this. All comic books are cheap entertainment for children, nothing more, nothing less, and I reject your theory." I said to him, "Dean, can I ask you 2 questions?" He said, "Ask me anything you want." I said, "Are you familiar with the story of Moses?" And he looked at me like I was crazy and said, "Yeah, so?" I said, "Very briefly, could you just summarize the story of Moses for me?" Well, he folded his arms and he looked at me and he said, "I don't know what game you're playing here, but I'll play this with you." He said the Hebrew people were being persecuted, their firstborn were being slain. Hebrew couple placed their infant son in a little wicker basket, sent him down the River Nile. There he was discovered by an Egyptian family who raised him as their own son. I said, "Dean, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You said you read Superman comics when you were a kid. Do you remember the origin of Superman?" He said, "Well, sure. The planet Krypton was about to blow up. A scientist and his wife placed their infant son in a little rocket ship and sent him to Earth. There he's discovered by the Kents, who raised him as their own son." And then he stopped, stared at me for what I swear was an eternity, and said, "Your course is accredited." So I got back to my apartment, I picked up the telephone, and I called the Associated Press, or the United Press International, which was like Associated Press back then. I got a reporter on the phone, and I started to scream at the guy. I said, "What's wrong with you? You're supposed to be the watchdogs in this society. You're not doing your job. This is terrible." He goes, "Calm down. What are you talking about?" I said, "I hear there's a course on comic books being taught at Indiana University." I never taught one class that wasn't filled with TV cameras from NBC Nightly News and the CBS Evening News. The next thing I know, I get a call one day. It's from a man named Stan Lee. Stan was the co-creator of the pantheon of Marvel superheroes. He says, "Mike, everywhere I look, I'm seeing you on TV, I'm reading about you. How can I help you?" 2 hours later, the president of DC Comics called. It was the same kind of a call. He said, "Let us fly you to New York. Let's talk about ways we can work with a young man like you." And that set me on my career, set me on the path that would one day lead me to Batman and Batman movies. What is it about Batman that seems to have captured the heart of so many people? Well, I think if you're going to give out accolades and you really want to call attention to the people who really made it happen, I have been so privileged over the last few decades to work with a few actual geniuses. If you think about the impact Tim Burton and Anton Furst had, and I would throw Danny Elfman in there too, because virtually every movie since then that's been part of this genre, you can kind of still see Tim Burton's vision. You can still kind of feel Anton's sense of set design permeating them. You can still hear Danny Elfman's notes in the background of so many different musical scores that have come since then. Well, the thought that sometime later I would have an opportunity to be involved in a film with yet another genius, this one by the name of Christopher Nolan. You can walk out of the theater and say, not just that this was a great comic book movie, you could say this was a great film. Thematically important in terms of what he delivered, where so many critics called it the most important post-9/11 movie that had been made to date. The last thing I want to say is to all of tonight's filmmakers, please remember something. Some of the greatest filmmakers in Hollywood won student film festivals. But most of the great filmmakers in Hollywood never won a student film festival. Just remember, this whole thing about filmmaking comes down to one thing: passion. have the passion, if it's burning inside of you, if there's nothing you can do about it, you've got to pursue it. You've got to go to Hollywood. You've got to go to New York. You've got to make this into your life's work. It took me 10 years from the time I bought the rights to Batman until we were able to get the first movie made. I was turned down by every single studio in Hollywood. They told me I was crazy and it was the worst idea they ever heard. But when you're burning with that passion for it, and you just love it, and you feel right in a creative environment, don't let any joker talk you out of it. Congratulations.